A phone rang in quiet Northern California just days after the closing ceremony of the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan, and the 20-year-old woman who picked it up was jet-lagged, emotionally wrecked, and completely unprepared for the voice waiting on the other end of that line. It was not a sponsor, not an agent, not a politician hunting for a photo opportunity, but Wardell Stephen Curry himself, calling personally. No publicist, no press release, no social media post crafted for applause. Just a man picking up his own phone and dialing a young woman he had never met. Steph Curry had spent over a decade as the undisputed face of the Golden State Warriors, a global icon who rewired the entire sport of basketball from the ground up, and now he was reaching out to a 20-year-old figure skater from Oakland with a private invitation straight from his own hands. He told Alysa Liu he had watched her skate, told her he understood the magnitude of what she had just
Alysa Liu had just done what no American woman had managed to do in over 2 full decades, walking onto the ice in Milan and single-handedly ending 20 years of American figure skating heartbreak in front of a watching world that had almost stopped believing it was possible. She had already locked down a team event gold medal for the United States, but the women's individual final was the moment that stopped the breath of millions of people simultaneously and reminded every skeptic alive exactly what this sport looks like when it reaches its absolute ceiling. In that individual final, she stepped out alone onto a blinding white sheet of ice with 15,000 people staring at her in total silence. Judges hovering behind monitors, ready to fire deductions for a blade that enters at the wrong angle or a knee that doesn't bend deep enough on a landing. She had exactly 4 minutes to throw her body into the air, rotate 3 or 4 times in a single blink, and land backwards on a piece of steel no wider than a butter knife. And she did every single moment of it with a calmness that made trained commentators forget to speak.
When the music swelled to its final note and the scores lit up the giant screen above the ice, the math confirmed precisely what 15,000 sets of human eyes had already processed, and Alysa Liu was crowned the Olympic champion that American figure skating had been bleeding for since 2002. But Steph Curry did not call her simply because she won the gold medal. He called her because he knew the price she had silently paid to get there, and the almost unbearable road she had been forced to survive before she ever laced up skates in that Italian arena. At just 16 years old, 3 years after becoming the youngest United States national champion in the entire recorded history of the sport, Alysa Liu walked away from figure skating completely, and the world of elite sports immediately declared her story finished, tragic, and permanently closed. She had been living inside a brutal pressure cooker since she was 13, waking before dawn, slamming her body onto hard ice over and over, having her weight and diet and technique dissected across competitions in Russia, Japan, and Europe, while her central nervous system quietly disintegrated beneath the surface.
The burnout was total, and it was invisible. She didn't know who she was without skates laced to her feet. The pure childlike joy of flying across ice had been completely extinguished by the relentless demands of a machine that consumed prodigies and moved on without ever looking back. For nearly 2 years, the experts were proven right, as she vanished entirely, enrolling at UCLA and stepping into the completely normal world of university life, where for the first time in her memory, her alarm didn't ring at 4:30 in the morning, and no judge was grading her worth as a human being. To understand why her story didn't end quietly in a college dorm room, you have to stop looking at the ice and start looking at the man who raised her, because Arthur Liu is not your typical sports parent screaming from the boards about edge control and medal counts. Arthur's story begins thousands of miles away in China in 1989 during a government crackdown that shook the world, when a young man made a desperate, life-altering decision to flee everything he had ever known, cross an ocean with almost nothing, and plant himself inside the sprawling uncertainty of America.
Arthur taught himself, earned a law degree from scratch, built a successful career in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then made the deliberate, unconventional choice to become a single father through surrogacy, raising 5 children on one foundational philosophy, that their worth was never tied to their trophies. He raised Alysa to be fiercely independent, told her to question everything, and when she wandered into a local ice rink as a little girl simply because it was fun, he supported her purely for the joy of it, refusing to let the sport swallow her identity, even as the world began calling her a once-in-a-generation genius. One quiet day during her time at UCLA, with no cameras and no announcements, Alysa walked into a local rink, paid for a public session, laced up her skates, and felt the cold air rush past her face again for the first time in years, purely because some deep part of her simply wanted to. That was the invisible beginning of a comeback nobody believed in, and when she finally appeared at a minor competition in 2024, every person in that building understood immediately they were watching something transformed. Not a scared prodigy anymore, but a grown woman skating on her own terms, for her own joy, with every last trace of fear completely burned away.